as a founder, what it feels like to have a profitability problem and then be stuck with this issue of like, I have all these resources at my disposal, but like, I don't even really know what to do with them. That's the problem. That's what we want to just solve. Welcome to the Agency Profit Podcast, a show dedicated to going deep space on agency operations, which is just as nerdy as it sounds. I'm your host, Marcel and I'm the CEO of Parakeeto, a firm that helps digital and creative agencies measure and improve their profitability. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and agency owners in our space and go deep into operations, metrics, and all the other things you need to get right so you can spend less time worrying about operations and more time executing on your vision. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agency Profit Podcast. I'm joined again today by Carson Pierce. Hey, Carson.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing good. I mean, you and I just got off a one-on-one, so you know how I'm doing at a spiritual level at this point.
There's some depth there.
Yes, there is some depth. Yeah. Am I going to talk about it? I'm not going to talk about it on this episode.
That would take up our whole time.
It will take up. Yeah. But yeah, maybe one day we'll do an episode on the spiritual journey that I went on recently. But anyway,
All right.
So related to that, we're going through a bit of a spiritual journey as a company, and it's happening in public at the time that we're recording this. I mean, this is probably not going to come out for a little while, but at the time that we're recording this, Carson, we are working on our positioning, or refining, how we talk about who we are and what we do at Parakeeto. And we're doing it in somewhat of a public way. We've posted on LinkedIn about it a few times. We've sent out an email to our list to ask for some feedback. And it's been a really interesting experiment to work on this in somewhat of a public way. And so I think that's what we're here to talk about today, is both like that at somewhat of a macro level, like the macro process of working and positioning in public, but then also just like some of the questions and things that we've learned from that, and addressing a lot of the things that people had asked us in those comments and in the feedback that we've gotten explicitly. So with all that, I'll turn it over to you, Carson. What do you think is important for us to dig into today based on all the things we've heard the last few weeks?
Yeah, well, and a lot of this is personal as well. Like for myself as a consultant at Parakeeto, it's like, what is my role? Because when I think about what I do with our agency clients right now, it's pretty broad. Sometimes I draw on my project management background and we just deal with project management stuff. Sometimes we're looking at financials. Sometimes we're talking about operational things like hiring and contractors. And there's so many things that we cover. It is hard to pin down what do I do here? But a lot of that traces back to the Parakeeto problem too, which is, who are we? What do we do? You posted the question on LinkedIn, I guess trying to get clarification around, are we the intersection of a CFO and a COO? So maybe we'll start there, because I think there's a lot of that resonates, but there's also a lot of gaps in between those two things. So I'm curious from your perspective, when you think about what Parakeeto is designed to do, what I'm supposed to be out there doing, how does it fit into those two buckets, first of all, and then we can figure out what's spilling outside of those buckets.
Yeah, I'll take a quick step back. And I just want to talk a little bit about the problem, just sort of the frame, right? My understanding, and I think this was very much reaffirmed by a lot of the feedback that we got about like where Parakeeto is in terms of his positioning. So the things that I think we've done really well over the years is we've been very clear about the problem that we solve and who we solve it for, right? We help agencies measure and improve their profitability. We've been very on message about that for a very long time. And that's all great. And I think that gets people's attention. And we're very good at talking about that problem, talking about profitability and the nuances of it. We get very much in the weeds. And like, I think that that's been great. And the feedback that we got and my understanding going into this was like, people know that we care about profitability and we help people with profitability, and that we know profitability, that we are experts at this and we know what we're doing. We know what we're talking about. And there's just like tons of evidence of that. But then where the sort of rub was like, okay, but like, how exactly do you do that? When I give money to Parakeeto, what do I get in return? And, I think there's a whole bunch of reasons that that's been challenging. We're going to talk about some of those today, which is like the solution to that problem is not inherently simple, actually, because it touches finance and delivery and operations and project management and new business and like leadership and strategy. It like touches all of those things, and it doesn't replace a job. Like if you were to think about this through jobs to be done, like there isn't a job in most firms that actually encapsulates what we do. It's that's kind of the whole reason we exist, right? Is because like most agencies don't have a person to do this job, and it's like impossible to find one person to do this job. At least it's very difficult. I've been very lucky to find a couple of unicorns and to be able to build a process around them. But yeah, that's kind of the frame. And I think that it's important to discuss that. Is like, okay, we know that we have this profitability problem that we're focused on, but like, how do we actually do that? What do you actually get? How much of it is consulting? How much of it is technology? These are a lot of the questions that we got from people of like, this all makes sense, but I still have no idea what's inside the box, what's inside the tin, and how it works.
Yeah, I think when I think about that question, the problem is that it's the typical answer, it depends. There are so many different places that we could touch on for any particular situation that, and we will, we'll go wherever the problem is and try to solve that. So like, how do you pinpoint or how do you articulate that in a way that is easy to explain to someone?
Yeah. And so this sort of pulls on like what I discovered from this exercise, and then this will start to kind of answer your question here. Is like there were two opportunities that became very, very clear. The first is like a positioning question, which is like, are we a new category or are we putting ourselves in an existing category? And for the longest time, we made the decision that we were going to create a new category because we don't belong squarely in an existing category. We're not like we're not a fractional CFO per se. We're not a fractional COO per se. We're not a software company per se. We're not exactly, I mean, I guess you could call us a consulting firm, but then that's like so diluted that, what does that even mean at all? And so we decided, we're going to be the world's first profit management firm. We're going to do profit management. The problem with that is nobody knows what that means. And so that's a really difficult thing when you're trying to communicate to someone like what they get when they buy something from you. Is like, if I told you that we sold cars, well, you know what a car is. And so, you can, in your mind, just knowing that, visualize like, okay, well, if I give you a certain amount of money, I'm going to get a thing that has 4 wheels and a steering wheel and seats on the inside and like, a trunk, and you put either batteries or gas in it and it drives. And I know what a car is. But if I tell you that you get profit management, you have no idea what that is. But if I tell you get a fractional CFO, then you have some idea of what that might be. And so that became an obvious thing, which is like, I think it's time for us to stop trying to create our own category and instead look at the categories that already exist that are adjacent or are close enough and start to position ourselves in those categories so that we can borrow from the pre-existing understanding that people have of what those things are as a way to shortcut the question of like, what exactly do I get when I work with you guys? So that started to open up this interesting exercise that we did, or this idea that I had, which is like, okay, well, you have fractional CFOs and you have fractional COOs, and we're kind of like the best of both worlds. And I'm not going to talk about the tech anymore because like it really doesn't matter. Yes, there is technology, but it's just helping us do the fractional CFO and fractional COO work. That's really what you're buying when you work with us. It's like, it just so happens that we've built things to make that financially accessible to this market that we're selling to. And it just wouldn't be if we didn't do that work to make it more efficient. So like that was one side of the positioning, and we can come back to the positioning, but like, I think that's where we're sort of landing with this is like, and maybe we just lean all the way into we're fractional CFOs, and then we can get into like what that means and why that's still not very clear from a positioning perspective, because you ask 10 different people what a fractional CFO does, you get 10 different answers. And there is a very wide spectrum of what that could mean. And then the other side was like just super tactical stuff, which was just like, it's just not clear, like basic stuff, right? Like, what does it cost? How long does it take? What are the steps involved? What are the deliverables that I get? What do they look like? What numbers do they include? Like, that was just like information that we just didn't have on the website that we just need to put on the website and be more clear about. So that was nice because that was like an easy low hanging fruit of like, I just need to put in the time to like put this information on the site. And we're still working on that, but like that was good. Those were the two big things that came out of this. And now the positioning one is the one that we're still working through, and I think has a bit of a longer tail because it is more nuanced.
Yeah. So here's the problem that I foresee, which is a lot of agencies, especially the ones that are a bit smaller that we work with. I mean, at a certain point, you get what a CFO is going to do for you and what a COO is going to do for you. But there's a lot of agencies that are not talking in terms of see anything. It's just a founder and a team, you know? And they might not even get like, okay, you're talking to me about CFO or COO. What does that even mean? Like, what do those people do? Because if an agency is going to hire an ops person of any size, whether they have a C in their title or not, um, it's still pretty vague. Like they're going to come in and do stuff. But we don't ever really stop to define that. So, and we don't need to define it for everyone, but we do need to figure out what it means for Parakeeto to offer that kind of service. So maybe I'll just pause there to say, when you think about Parakeeto offering that intersection of CFO and COO, what do each of those components mean?
Yeah, it's a good question. And there's two ways that I want to answer this. I'm going to start with the last one because I don't want to forget to talk about this, but I was having a conversation with somebody recently about this thing. And it became very clear to me what I think one of the things that's so important about why we do what we do the way that we do it is, which is I think as founders or as executive teams in agencies, you have a profitability problem. And then you kind of sit back and you have to take an inventory of like all the different puzzle pieces. You have the tech, the PM tool, the time tracking tool, the accounting tool, and like all of like the PM ops data software side of this. And then you have sort of more of the ops strategy. And then you have the project management side. And then you have a finance component to that. And then you have a new business component to that. And like business intelligence and analytics and modeling. And there's like all these different facets to the problem. And if you were to take a step back from those problems and think about the people, there's all kinds of different people that would touch those different areas. You have your PMs and your ops managers or COOs. You have the finance people, accountants and CFOs and controllers and FDs. And then, you might have somebody that's like at a more strategic level, like a coach that's thinking about pricing and go to market and these kinds of things, new business. And you might have, if you're more advanced, like data analysts or data engineers, right? So you have all these different like people. And the biggest frustration that I think I felt when I was in this seat and that I think a lot of teams are feeling is like, you have all these pieces to the puzzle. And at the end of the day, you have to try to figure out how to put them together. And you have to quarterback this hodgepodge team of experts that all have these weird shapeless scopes and you try to piece them together, but like there's always these gaps because the scopes don't quite overlap. And it's like hard for you to even know where one person begins and the other one ends. And you don't even really know what their job title is. And like, what is the difference between like a senior accountant and a fractional CFO? And, why is this fractional CFO getting in the weeds with operations, but this one over here won't? And at the end of the day, it's like, I just want this to get taken care of. And that is what Parakeeto is. Right? We saw this problem and we saw that the issue was that you have like all of these little components and we just said, let's just fucking fix it. Don't worry about like figuring out how to piece this together. Don't worry about how we're going to plug into your existing ops and finance and leadership team. It's like, that's just what we do. We come in and we take care of it and we figure out how to put the puzzle pieces together. And I think that's like the simplest articulation of what it is and why it's been so hard to say we are a fractional CFO or a fractional C, because it's like we're like a level abstracted from all of that. Our job is to like come in and figure out that puzzle for you so you don't have to worry about it. And I think that this is like a problem in especially the finance department including personal finance, where it's like you have your bookkeeper and your accountant and your controller and your CFO and your tax person and then your family office and your estate planning. It's like, it's just, and like, what do even half of these job titles mean? And there's this massive problem in just that area of business where it's like, it's always up to you as the founder to try to like put together and quarterback this team of people. And you don't even understand what half of them are doing. So anyway, that was like a very long monologue, but I think it was an important thing, because if I think about like as a founder, what it feels like to have a profitability problem and then be stuck with this issue of like, I have all these resources at my disposal, but like I don't even really know what to do with them. That's the problem. That's what we want to just solve.
And a lot of times these agencies aren't at the size where they're trying to decide if they're hiring a CFO or a COO. Like they don't really need either of those things. They need something broader than that. And that's exactly what you're just talking about. It's like just there's going to be components of both of those things in it, but it's something bigger and more holistic that we need to be talking about. Because agencies of a certain size can't afford to have 5 different people playing 5 different roles. They need someone who gets the whole picture. And it sounds like that's kind of where we're trying to land here too.
Totally. And anyway, we don't have to go down the rabbit hole of like all the reasons that sucks, right? To like try to piece together a whole bunch of experts, where then you have all this inefficient communication and context sharing and all of this stuff. And like at the end of the day, you still have to know enough to know if it's going well and if everybody's doing, the right things and the right job and looking at it in the right way. And you probably have all these differences of opinion and framework and philosophy. And like it can be a mess to try to like really find all the right experts for all the different pieces. And then conversely, you can try to like find a generalist to come in and do this, but like then they probably won't know how, and they won't have the sufficient knowledge in each of the areas to like really solve this whole problem. We see that all the time. It's like the senior most ops or PM person in the organization that's voluntold like, hey, it's your job to figure out profitability now. And it's not to say they can't do it, but like off the side of their desk, it's probably going to take them a while and be a real thorn in their side. And the opportunity cost of that is significant. And so yeah, to your point, it's like we have a system and a framework and people that can come in and sort of just like shape themselves to your context. And I think that's why sometimes it's a little bit hard to describe like what exactly is your job title, Carson, when you go into an agency. And it's like it's amorphous because it looks different depending on the client and who's on their team and what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. And we have to adapt to that situation. And thankfully we have the skill sets and you have the skill sets to be able to make that adaptation, because you've spent 20 years playing just about every role there is to play in this profitability equation. And so you're able to kind of put on the right hats for the right clients at the right time, but also be backed by this process that we have that is like really providing a solid foundation for all of this.
Yeah, and I think one thing you've kind of touched on a little bit, but the fact that we're coming in with a very clear background in agency is a huge step forward. Like I've talked to other agencies where they brought in someone to be, the equivalent of a CFO or a COO, but doesn't have the agency side. And there's so much context that you have to get them up to speed on. They have to understand what it's like working with freelance designers, what it's like trying to maximize capacity, what clients are like in our industry. They're like all of this stuff you need to teach someone from the outside all over again. Whereas because we're coming in with all that context we've seen inside hundreds and hundreds of agencies, you can bypass all that. So we get right to like, okay, well, what do you need? We already know all that stuff. What do you need? What are the things we need to focus on? And like I said before, that can be such a broad range of problems that our first step is always like, okay, well, who's here? What can they do? And where are the gaps? And let's jump in and fill those.
Now, I want to answer the question that you asked originally, and I'll try to do this succinctly, which is like, what is the difference between Parakeeto and like a traditional fractional CFO, fractional COO? And I think the answer is if you go to our website, at least at the time that we're recording this, there's a visualization that sort of depicts this, which is like if there's a Venn diagram of on the left side you have a CFO, on the right side you have a COO, Parakeeto would be where they sort of intersect in the middle, and we would bleed into each circle. And so if I think about like why typically neither of those are going to be a complete solution. And I'm generalizing because I think there are people, like we know some of these people that are able to bridge the gap between the two, and they're currently positioning themselves as a fractional CFO or a fractional COO. But like the thing that you want to look for, whether you're looking to work with us or anybody else, is like the danger with a fractional CFO is that they come from a finance background. If you think about the fractional CFO spectrum, it's a very wide spectrum of potential responsibility. And on one side of that spectrum is like very finance core stuff. It's accounting and bookkeeping and tax and M&A and banking and cash management and how much interest are you earning on the cash reserves that you have and what is your cash management strategy and debt financing and refinancing debt and capital management, like all this stuff, FinOps, like, and FinOps meaning like financial operations and tooling, like, what is the tech stack and the ERP and how does all that stuff integrate? Like that is, when you really think about most enterprise CFOs, like that is a big part of the job. And then where a lot of those finance core CFOs will maybe be weaker or not willing to spend as much time is on the operations side, which is like, okay, we have all of this stuff going on. What does it mean in terms of business strategy? And profitability is an inherently operational issue. And I think thinking of profitability as a finance issue is sort of trying to wag the dog by the tail, in that finance is where the profitability issue becomes apparent in retrospect. But the thing that changes profitability is operations, right? You need to change what you are doing at an operational level to become more profitable. Finance is just like the place that it happens to become visible. And so that's what requires, if you have a fractional CFO that's going to help you with profitability, they need to be very, very willing to go very, very deep into operations and have a very strong handshake with the operations team. And then the flip side of that is operations is well suited to help with profitability, but the challenge there might be that they don't have the financial acumen to cross over and connect the dots and have that handshake. And like the intersection of finance and operations is really where the magic happens. And that is why we have sort of struggled with what to call ourselves and how to position ourselves, because like that is it. That is the thing, is like doing both, doing just enough of both so that it's like perfectly suited to this problem and for this specific market, which is these boutique agencies that are in that like 1, 2, 3 on the low side million in revenue to like 10, 20, 30 on the high side. And we have larger clients in that, of course, but generally that's like the sweet spot that we are really well suited to serve.
Do you want some free resources to help you measure and improve your profitability? If you do, then I want to tell you about our agency profitability toolkit, which you can grab absolutely free in the show notes or by heading to parakeeto.com/toolkit. It's packed with training videos, cheat sheets, templates, and all kinds of other great resources to help you start measuring and improving the essential metrics that are going to drive better profitability in your business. And it's helped thousands of other agencies around the world do the same. So I want to encourage you to go and grab a copy of that. And if you'd rather get in the fast lane and just have our team of experts guide you through the process of measuring and improving your profitability, then I want to encourage you to apply for a consultation at parakeeto.com. And with that, I want to thank you again for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll let you get back to it.
It's funny because as you're describing all of this, I think I realize where agencies are really struggling, and that being that they're looking. The CFO side is always looking historically, but what we really, really need to do is be able to look into the future, because profitability isn't the ability to make profit, not to look back and see how much you made. So being able to look around the corners and see what's coming is where the real magic lies. And yeah, that's the operational side of things. Using your data from the CFO side for the COO side. So I don't know, I'm saying this out loud because it's starting to become more clear for me even to understand how it all fits together, where the gaps are, and where we start to fit in. But again, it comes back to like, how do you communicate that to people in a way that they understand? And maybe a lot of that comes back to your other question around like, what are we actually delivering? Like, what do you get? Are you getting, financial reporting? Are you getting operational guidance? Like, I mean, I know how it feels for me on the ground doing the work, but how do you communicate it when you're trying to sell this stuff?
Yeah, well, and this is something I have to get better at, but let's answer that question, because I think it starts to get into why we do things the way that we do. And you've just touched on something important, right? Which is like forecasting and being able to look forward is like such an important part of what we do. And the sequencing of that, I think, is so important because, I mean, we've both seen this a million times. An agency has a profitability problem. They jump straight to feedback loops. They're like, oh, we need to like double down on accounting and track time. And again, they're putting the cart before the horse. They're doing the last thing first. When like, we don't even need time tracking data for some of our clients. Some of our clients don't track time at all. Doesn't matter. We're still getting them the insights. So with all that said, what do you actually get when you work with Parakeeto? Well, we have a 2-step process. The first step is what we call an assessment. And the assessment is a lot like what it sounds like. We spend the first week gathering up a whole bunch of information about the company. So we look, we get access to financials and time tracking if it exists, project management tools. We build what's called a payroll grid, which is basically a list of like everybody on the team, how much they get paid, how many hours they work, how much time off they get, where they spend time in the business. And then we ask questions. There's an intake form and we want to understand the business. And so we take all that information in, and the first thing we do with it, Carson, right, is we build a model. That's the first thing we do is we say, okay, let us understand what the expectations are here. Right. So if everybody on the team worked the right amount of hours and, we were able to keep them busy and we were pricing, in the way that we expect to price, and we spent, the right amount of money on overhead, what we expected to spend on overhead, like, what does that look like? That's the first question we've got to ask, because it helps us answer the question of like, is this business even viable, like set up to be viable in the first place? Most of the time, the answer is yes, it is. Sometimes the answer is no, right? So it's like, we don't need to know anything else from that point. It's like, that's the problem. We got to fix that. We don't need to go get time tracking data. We don't need to do any of that. It's like, first thing we have to do is change the assumptions that this business is based on, because they will never lead us to success unless we change them. So we do that. And then in week 2, we're doing stakeholder interviews. So generally at that point, we've had a look at historical performance. We've compared it to the model. So we have an understanding of like, okay, where might be there be some gaps. We have stakeholder interviews in week 2 where we make sure we understand like what's actually going on behind the numbers. We validate our thesis. And then week 3, we do a workshop. And in that workshop, we basically come and deliver, here's the problem. Here's why you're suffering with this problem. Here's the metrics that you need to focus on and the targets you need to get to. And then we work with them to build a roadmap on what next steps they're going to take to actually move those metrics in the right direction. So that is ultimately like the deliverable in the assessment. And what they take away from that, of course, is like the workshop board, which has visualizations and notes and like all of our findings, like it's documented and written down. And there's also this model that we built of their business that we play with on the workshop, and they get to take with them and use on an ongoing basis as well. So they know, what if we hire somebody or change our pricing or whatever, how does that change the numbers? So like that was a really long explanation for the assessment, but basically the assessment is this process by which we get to clarity on like, what is the problem? Why is that a problem? What is the next step that you need to be focused on to get to profitability? That's essentially what we're doing in like 3 to 4 weeks. Would you describe it any differently, Carson?
I think by the time you get to the end of the assessment and you have that roadmap in front of you, and we've discussed, we've worked through it together to figure out what's important and where we need to focus. The question of, are we CFO, are we COO, are we something in between, isn't really a factor anymore. It's just like, well, what's the problem and how are we going to fix it? It becomes really clear, and we don't need to articulate it anymore. It's pretty, you build up a level of trust at that point, and you can just get to the work. It's the lead up to all of that. I think the assessment answers the question. We just need to do assessments for everyone and we'll be all set.
Yeah. Yeah. It is a nice thing where it's like, I think people just kind of get it at that point. Right. And so then that leads into step 2, right? So some of our clients after the assessment, they've got what they need. They've got the clarity that they were looking for, and they're just going to go off and execute on that thing. A lot of our clients decide that they want continued support from us as they look to make the improvements to their business and drive things in the right direction. And so that's where we go into profit management. And profit management, I think you could think of that as like a fractional CFO type relationship with like some fractional COO sprinkled into that, where the first thing that we want to do is have a baseline of reporting. So like the lowest level of service that we have still includes on a monthly basis management accounting reporting, which like regardless of what your accounting data looks like today, we're going to figure out what was your revenue, agency gross income, delivery margin, overhead spending by category. So we can figure out like, are you performing well relative to the targets and benchmarks that we identified in the assessment? And like, are you trending towards the outcomes that we're looking for? And we're also going to pay attention to average billable rate and utilization, which are like the two biggest operational levers that are going to determine profitability. We have higher levels of service where there's like more forecasting involved. And then we have even higher levels of service where we get into like very advanced, very detailed, like project level performance, individual and team utilization rates. Like we can get really granular with all of that. And that reporting is all completely done for you. So like, you don't have to worry about it anymore, basically. There's like a couple of simple inputs you got to keep up to date, like make sure that we know who's on your team and how much they're getting paid, and make sure we know what projects you're working on and how much you're making on those. That's pretty much it. And we take care of the rest. So it is a very, very like easy way to get a very big lift in visibility. And I think it's a huge relief for a lot of teams that have been trying for years to get to that place. But I think the more important thing than the reporting is the relationship that we have around that, which is that we meet on a regular basis to look at it together. We come having looked at it and, we have an opinion and a perspective on what the focus needs to be and what's going on. And we're constantly working on the roadmap that we established in the assessment and updating that roadmap and making progress towards it and keeping clients focused on the right thing. It's a big part of our job of preventing them from like going and working on stuff that's just not going to move the needle mathematically, like just like, hey, that is not moving the needle on these numbers, and helping make sure that they have the support that they need to do that. And sometimes that's like you put on your project management consulting hat. Other times you're putting on your CFO hat. Other times you're putting on just like your business coach hat. Sometimes you're kind of like a co-founder therapist. Like it looks a little different from one client to another and one call to another. But that consulting piece is really, I think, where the majority of the value lies. And it's just enhanced by having the numbers there to give us like a very, very, very clear understanding of what's important at a given moment in time and if we're making progress.
Yeah, I think, like you said, that focus part of it is really key. I've seen so many agencies focus on cutting software expenses or try to find a better tool to handle whatever. All these little things that, I mean, there might be some incremental advantage there, but they're not really where you need to focus. And having someone to go like, let me show you with the numbers how much of an impact what you're talking about will make versus what something else will make, and really giving them that direction. And then I think part of that, the value there comes in this outside perspective, not being so emotionally invested in some of those decisions. Like, no, I can tell you from the outside exactly what's going on and what you need to look at. And then the third part of that is perspective. Like we're coming in, having looked at 100 other agencies recently that we can draw on to tell you, here's what's going on in the industry. Here's what other agencies are doing, that kind of thing, which so often when you're working in a vacuum, you're just sort of guessing at what the right thing to do is. And it's really disconcerting to go like, I think this is what I should do, but I really don't know. And to have that validated with a bunch of external perspective is really important.
I agree. And I think at the end of the day, what we are trying to do, and what I think the most important thing is that we deliver, is the right actions at the right time from a place of alignment among the team. And we are there to remove everything that has historically got in the way of that. And so in some firms, that's the leadership team spending so much time in spreadsheets and data and reporting, trying to figure out what's going on, that they spend no time doing anything about it, or working very hard to get to the outcome or get to the data, and then they don't know what it's telling them or what it means, and then they're still no better off and still guessing at what to do. Or, they don't have any of this visibility, and then it becomes this sort of subjective discussion and they can't agree and everybody has different opinions. And again, they're not taking the right actions, or they have an idea of what the thing could be, but they have no confidence or no conviction around this. So they're sort of half committed. And really the most valuable thing that we can do for an organization is go in, remove all doubt, get the whole team on board with like, this is the problem. This is what we need to do next. This is the focus. And then empower them to spend none of their time figuring that out and all of their time going and moving it forward. And if we can do that, it's just like, it's a beautiful thing. The return on investment is so clear. Everybody feels better. And there's this very intangible value, which is like everyone's sleeping better at night. Everyone's like getting along. There's a sense of confidence, a sense of clarity. And it is really a beautiful thing when it happens.
Two thoughts that just came to mind from what you just said. One is the return on investment. I did have a client recently ask me, we're paying you X amount of dollars every month to do this. Are we going to be able to afford that? And to show them when you focus on the right thing, how ridiculous a question that is almost. Like there's so much movement in your profitability. The investment on it is so small, just to have that help in driving it forward. And I forgot what the second one was. Yeah, like it just becomes really clear what kind of value we can provide there.
Now, one thing that I want to address explicitly is, do we do accounting and bookkeeping? This is a question we've been asked many, many times over the years. For a long time, the answer was no. And it surprises people because, again, I think a lot of people assume that profitability is a finance problem. So they're like, how could you possibly be fixing profitability if you don't do bookkeeping and accounting? And the feature of how we did this is like, it's not that we're ignoring your finance data. It's just that like everybody's finance data is so bad most of the time. Not so bad, but like it's so not structured for this purpose that like we have just gotten really, really good at taking that. We have a whole process where we take it out of QuickBooks, out of Xero. We have this process where we do some transformations and we get it into the format that it needs to be in to do this job, which is like, understanding and improving profitability. And the benefit of that is we can get to the outcome without disrupting the finance department at all. And that is a feature, right? It's not that we said no to that because like, it was too much work or something like that. It's like, it was just getting in the way. And there was a time when we would go and try to coach the bookkeeping team and try to get them to like change how they were doing things at the source. And we just realized like, this is pointless. It's such a waste of time. It does not take us much effort to get to this outcome. And we just don't need to change anything. And in our perspective, like, especially when it comes to bookkeeping and it comes to tools, it's like the less we can change, the better. The goal is to get to the answer of what do we need to do to move profitability forward. Everything else is a distraction. So generally, right, like that is still our approach. However, we have been asked by so many clients for so many years, like, can we please just hire you to do our bookkeeping? Like whether it's because they're not happy with their current bookkeeping provider or they just like have a lot of peace of mind around all of this being done from one framework. And so recently we've started testing this out with some clients. I don't, maybe at the time that this is published, we'll be talking about it publicly, but like we have started doing accounting and bookkeeping with some of our clients. I would say that it's still not that important, but if it's like something that clients feel really good about having vertically integrated, there can be some advantages and we're able to do that now, which is not something that we were doing before. But I would still argue that like it's not necessary for getting all of the outcomes that we just talked about. It's certainly not necessary. And it's certainly like if somebody came to me and they're like, we have a profitability problem. Should we get a new bookkeeper or should we do this other thing? Like 100% of the time it's do this other thing that I just talked about. Like the bookkeeping will just not get you there. So it's like a bonus. It's a nice to have, but it's almost never going to be our focus if a client comes to us and says we need help with profitability. But it's like something now that like if they want it, we can help them with it.
And I'm looking forward to that. I like being more and more involved in what our agency clients are doing. And so to have direct access into that and be able to support that is cool. And I'm looking forward to it. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to chat about, but like this whole thing was driven by a post on LinkedIn where you publicly asked, like, is this where we fit? And it'd be kind of interesting this is going to be months later, probably when this comes out, but to close a loop on this a little bit and for people who are listening to go, okay, now that I've heard all this, if there's other people that are still confused or have other perspectives, I think that's something that'd be really interesting to get some feedback on.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great call to action, actually, because here's the thing is, we now know, we're working on describing where we fit. But the thing is, we still don't really have a name for it. There's this siren song of let's just call ourselves fractional CFOs and call it a day. And then we'll just talk about why we're different than traditional fractional CFOs, specifically for this problem. But then there's still a part of me that's okay, well, if we occupy the space between a fractional CFO and a fractional COO, then what is that? And then we're getting back into category creation, but is it a chief profit officer? Is it a profit manager? Is it, what do we call that thing? A functional CFO is one that somebody suggested, which I thought was kind of interesting. Yeah, I'm really big into functional fitness and functional food. So I was oh, that's kind of interesting. Functional seems to be a very avant-garde thing. And so anyway, I've got all these ideas, but I would love your feedback. If after listening to this, you're more confused than you were, then tell us that. If you're more clear than you were, then please tell us that. If you have an idea on what we should do from a positioning perspective, I'd love to hear from you. And you can just email me directly, marcel@parakeeto.com. And I would love to hear what you think. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. Yeah, maybe at that point we'll have a little bit more clarity on this, but I would love to hear from you on this. Because at the end of the day, I think this has been my big realization. I've been working on this business for 7 years, and I think I've been reinventing the wheel in a whole bunch of ways that are completely unnecessary in hindsight. And at the end of the day, it's we're here to serve you. If you're listening to this, we're here to solve this problem for you. And I think I knew this psychologically, I knew this intellectually, you just got to listen to your customers, but you actually have to listen to your customers. And I don't think I was really doing that at the right level. And so this is an opportunity to say, what do you think? What do you go looking for when you have this problem? What would you call this? And there's a really good chance the answer is there. So please share it with me if you have it.
And then
thanks for the reminder, Carson.
The website again.
Yeah, well, I'm at peace with that.
Yeah. All right, cool. All right. Thanks, Marcel. I mean, if nothing else, I feel a little bit more clear about what I'm supposed to be doing. So hopefully other people do too.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for this, Carson. And thank you for listening. And we'll see you on the next one.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've ever found yourself thinking, man, I get so much value from this podcast, I wish there was something I could do to return the favor. Well, today's your lucky day because you can leave us a review wherever you're listening to this, and it is incredibly helpful. Of course, if you haven't grabbed a free copy of the Agency Profit Toolkit, go and get that. It's got tons of free resources to help you improve your profitability. If you're looking to get in the fast lane and get help from experts to improve your profitability and measure your most important metrics, then apply for a consultation at parakeeto.com. We'd love to chat with you and figure out how we can help. With all of that, thank you so much for being a listener, and we will see you on the next episode.